This is going to be a beginner's guide to Photoshop. In this video we're going to be looking at three main things. We're going to be looking at how to create a new document, how to open an image into Photoshop, how layers work and why we use them, how we move elements around our documents to create different compositions. So as you can see on the screen right now, I've got a blank white document open. Now to get to this stage, what I need to do is go to File, New. From here, we can choose lots of different things. I'm just going to make this a bit bigger so you can see. So we have some default options built into Photoshop. If you look along the top here, we have different options such as photo, print, art and illustration, web, mobile, film and video. All this is going to give us is different settings. So for example, if we're in photo, it's going to give us some default photo sizes such as 7 by 5 inches, 4 by 6 inches, and so forth. If we go to print, it will give us some default print layouts. A good example of that is A4 and A3. And you'll notice the millimeter values there as well. In A4, 210 by 297 millimeters. So when we create that new A4 document, we know that what we're working with is exactly A4. So when we come to then print that document, it is exactly A4 size. There'll be no stretching or distorting. If, for example, you accidentally made something smaller and tried to print it larger at A4, you would get distortion. So it's important at this stage to know what your outcome needs to be. So for now, I'm just going to click Create, and that's going to give us a new blank document. And you can see over on the Layers panel on the right hand side here, it is described as the background layer. So anything you load into Photoshop, be it a new blank document or a photograph, be described as your background layer, which will be locked. So if I use the Move tool over here, we can't move it. There we go, it's saying the currently selected layer is the background layer. You cannot move the background layer. So I'm just going to click Cancel that. If you want to be able to move your background layer, you can simply double click on the little padlock over here and it will allow you to unlock that layer. It now says layer 0 instead of background layer, and we can now move the background layer out of the way. And what you'll notice here is we now see a checkerboard pattern underneath our white. Checkerboard patterns are Photoshop's way of telling us that that is transparent. So that checkerboard isn't actually there and won't be there in your final work. It's transparency. So the other way in which we can get started by opening a document, instead of making a new file, we're going to click Open. And we can then choose any picture we want on our computer. I'm just going to choose one from a recent shoot that I did. And there we are. So we have an image loaded up rather than a blank document, and you can see it's still described as our background layer. So it's the same kind of starting point, you're just working with something blank or an existing image. So now what we're going to look at is how layers work and why we use them in Photoshop. So to do that, I'm going to show you something I prepared just now, and you can see we've got multiple layers. We've got the background layer plus 5 extra layers going on over here. So it might look quite complicated to start with, but I'm going to break it all down for you. So I have 3 different text layers, one for each word. I have layer 1 at the top here, which is the image, the Photoshop icon. I also have a color fill layer for the blue background. So each element within the image is a different layer. And when you make a document in that way, it becomes really easy to change things and make edits. And I can show you that by using the Move tool at the top here. If you're not sure what any tools do at any point, or you want to have an experiment with some different tools, just hover your mouse over any of the tools, like so, and Photoshop actually gives you a little description and a little video about what each of the tools does. Just let your mouse hover over for a few seconds and then it will come up. So for now we want the Move tool, which is the default first tool. Making sure that we have the layer selected that we want to move, we can then put our Move tool over the element we can click and drag our mouse and we can move those elements around. If I try and select another element, it will automatically change the layer and allow me to move that element, like so. Now what you'll notice is these layers are in a very specific order. You can click and drag layers to reorder them. So a good example of that would be my layer 1. So my layer 1 is sitting on the top. The topmost layer is the thing that's visible first. So if I drag layer 1 beneath the word beginners, you can see a little blue line comes up telling me that it's going to snap into place. When I let go, it's going to then be below the beginners layer. I can then move that layer and we can see that it's underneath the word beginners, but it's not underneath the other two words. If I were to do that again, I'm going to drag it underneath all three words. And you can see now it's underneath all three words. This is how layers are working. So it's different elements stacked on top of one another. If I take it down one more layer, underneath the color fill layer, it's going to disappear because it's underneath that solid color. It's still there, but it's not visible to us at the moment. Now, on the left-hand side of each layer, we can see a little eye icon. This can be toggled on and off to make each layer visible or invisible. So if I tick the solid color eye symbol, that color will disappear. It's still there, but it's not visible at the moment. We can now see our icon again because it's underneath the color fill layer. So I'm going to drag it above the fill layer and then I can turn that layer back on, and now we're back where we were. So the way in which I created this document from scratch would be to have our blank document in place. At the bottom of the layers panel, again, we can hover our mouse over anything to tell us what it is. And this one says create new fill or adjustment layer. So that is going to allow us to make an adjustment layer, and I'm going to choose solid color. My color happened to be purple at the time. I'm going to just change that back to the blue using the color picker that automatically comes up. I'm going to choose a blue that's kind of similar to what I chose before. Doesn't matter if it's exactly right. I'm going to click OK to confirm that. And you can see that that looks the same as I had before, a color fill layer. What I can then do is over on the left hand side on the tools panel, I'm going to select the T for type tool. I can then click and drag my mouse to make a bounding box, whatever size we want. At the moment, I'm just going to choose something roughly the right size that I want. This can be adjusted later. It's going to give us something called placeholder text to start with. If I just start typing, that will be deleted. And you can see the box I made isn't quite big enough, so I'm just going to click and drag to expand that so it fits within the space. The type tool is still selected, so we can highlight the text, and then at the top of Photoshop we have our options for the text. So you can choose different fonts, the font size, we can choose the color, whatever we like. To add the other elements of text, I just need to repeat the process. And when you're moving elements around the screen, what you'll notice is that there's an auto snap feature. When you find it's aligning with other elements or into the middle of the screen, it will snap automatically, which is a really useful feature. So it's really quick and easy to get things nice and neat and tidy. So you can see already I'm pretty much in the place where I was already. One last thing, what I'm going to show you is how to bring in an image element into this document, which is the Photoshop icon. We want to open it up in Photoshop first. So we want to go File, Open, and you want to find wherever the image you want to bring into this document is. Okay, so there we go. It's opened on its own rather than in the document we want to put it in. So there's lots of different ways to do this. One could be copying and pasting it into the document, but a nice easy way is making sure that our Move tool is selected. And I'm going to click and drag on the image. and I'm going to keep my mouse held down, bring it over to the other tab that I want, and still the mouse is held down, and only when it's over the document I want, I'm going to let go of my mouse. If we want to change the size of something in Photoshop, what we can do is press Ctrl T, and then that is the shortcut for transforming an element. Transforming just means you're changing the size or position of it. So I can then click and drag out from the center, and then I can reposition. I can then double click or press enter on the keyboard to confirm that selection. And you can see I've ended up with the same layers in the same order. From there I can tweak things and I can move things around if I want to. Obviously this is just an example document. Your images will be quite a bit different, but the principles are exactly the same. It's having the layers in certain orders on top or below one another, so they're visible or not visible. You can take this a step further and you can add different adjustment layers, and you can see from the list here we've got lots to choose from. A good example of this would be something like color balance. It will give you the properties menu automatically, in which you can then use the sliders to start changing the colors of the document. And remember, this layer is now on top, so it's going to affect the whole document. If we wanted this to just affect a certain area, we can then drag the layer downwards, so it's only affecting a certain element. So I've just done a bit of reordering there, so I've got it the way I like it for my thumbnail. And what I'm going to do then, when I've finished what I've done and I'm happy with the document, I can then right click on any layer and click flatten image. That's going to reduce all those layers into one flat image, as we can see there. From there we can't change anything really. We can't change the layer order or anything like that. This is the stage when we're finished. So then we can go up to the top, we can go File, Save As, and we can save our document. By default it will probably say Photoshop as the type, which is a PSD document. That's useful if you want to come back and work on something, and it will retain your layers. If you're finished, it might be a good idea to save your document as a JPEG. I'm just going to choose desktop for now, and then I'm going to give it a name. And then on JPEG options, it might be down to about 7 or 8. Just make sure that you drag that up to maximum quality to ensure that you're not losing any quality. And then click OK. And then we have a finished document saved to our desktop.